Brothers and sisters, we've now had a few consecutive weeks of readings which speak of prayer, persistence, and faithfulness. In these we have seen God, always present, always listening, and attentive to our pleas. On the other hand, there is us, his children, called on to remain hopeful and trusting that God won't abandon us, even when it seems that God is either not listening or delaying responding to our pleas. In the first reading today, Jesus ben Sirach, the author of the book, so beautifully speaks of the plight of the poor, the injured, the orphan, and the widow. Their supplications and prayers are heard in heaven. People who fall into these four groups are often victims of circumstances beyond their control, and their suffering is usually inflicted by the actions of other humans or by nature. No matter where they are in the world, even in the deepest jungles, God is hearing their appeal for justice, for mercy, for deliverance. In fact, as the Bible demonstrates in so many places, the God of Israel is more inclined towards those suffering in their unchosen circumstances than those who are living rich and fulfilled lives. If there are any of you here among these four groups, be consoled that our Father in heaven has you clearly in his sights and will never forsake you. While those suffering are closest to the heart of the Father, nevertheless, Jesus ben Sirach goes on to speak of two other groups of people to whom God's ear is inclined. Firstly, there are those who serve God with their whole heart. And secondly, there are those who are humble or poor in spirit. According to Jesus ben Sirach, their petitions and prayers will carry to and pierce the clouds. These people may not be the poor or injured or widowed or orphans. Even the rich and powerful can choose to serve God and recognize his omnipotence. Even those with strong and healthy bodies and minds and stable, happy families can recognize that everything they have has been gifted to them by God. In doing so, they remain humble in his sight. Brothers and sisters, how sweet it must be to the ears of God to hear prayers of thanksgiving and praise by those who, from a worldly perspective, already have everything and so have no need of God. I say this for many in the world today who don't believe in God, think religion is for the poor and the broken, and for those looking for a crutch to lean on. In some ways throughout the ages this may have been the case. How logical is it for someone suffering to look for God than for someone who thinks they already have everything they need or want? How quickly we can forget God when we are wealthy, successful, and happy. Yet, is it not God who is the source of all these good things? In today's gospel, we have two men coming to the temple to pray, a Pharisee and a tax collector. There is probably a pretty good chance that both of them had successful lives, wealth, health, and a happy family. The Pharisee, as an exalted member of religion, would have had the respect of the people, adherence to the law, status, and probably a lot of money that went with his role. The tax collector, while more likely to be despised by the people, like the Pharisee, probably also had lots of money. And if you had money in those days, you probably then got everything else that you wanted. Yet, one is justified before God, and the other is not. Brothers and sisters, they are both in the temple praying. But what is it that they are saying to God? The Pharisee, rather than thanking God for being entrusted with his leadership and teaching role, and the fact that he'd been blessed with prosperity by God, is basically telling God how good he is and standing in judgment of the tax collector. The tax collector, on the other hand, recognizes his rightful place before God. He is but a sinner. In humbling himself, his prayer pierced the clouds in a way that the Pharisees' egotistical exhortations could not. Irrespective of whether we may have already been humbled as a result of being poor or injured or an orphan or a widow on one hand, or wealthy, healthy and successful on another, we need to always be more like the tax collector and put everything into perspective. Let us remember Jesus' final words in the story. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. So let us always be grateful to God for all that we have, brothers and sisters. For without God, we have nothing. Without God, we are nothing, and without God, we can do nothing. And recognizing all of this, like Jesus ben Sirach says, our prayers will pierce the clouds, and the blessing of the Almighty will fall down upon us like the dewfall.